Greetings and welcome to episode 41 of Bible 180, 180 episodes between Genesis and Revelation. We are on 1 Samuel and the story of David and Goliath. It is about 1000 BC when David was born, and the story of David and Goliath is one of the best known and most well-loved stories in the Old Testament. Story of David and Goliath begins when David is a young lad, a wee young boy. He's not in the army, although his three brothers were. And in 1 Samuel, the people of Israel, the army of Israel, were encamped on one side of the valley of Elah, and the evil Philistines were encamped on the other side, and they were ready to engage in battle. The problem was that the Philistines had this warrior, this ox of a man, this giant whose name was Goliath, and he was mean, he was ugly, and he was huge. Translating to biblical measurements, he stood about, they say, 9 feet 9 inches, which would have made Yao Ming seem short. He had a bronze helmet around his size 15 head. He wore a coat of armor that was made of ringlets of bronze that went from his shoulders to his knees. Even the coat of armor weighed 175 pounds. He had bronze leggings to protect his legs. He had a bronze spear where just the head of the spear weighed 25 pounds. He had a shield carrier who walked in front of him carrying a shield about the size of a grown man that would protect Goliath's body from the arrows of the enemy. I mean, he was huge, he was big, bad, and ugly. Not only that, but he was a bully. He'd go out each morning and he'd yell out with his big, ugly breath to the people of Israel, "You bunch of sissies, why don't you come up and line up for battle? Send someone out, any of y'all, and let's have it out. If I win, you surrender, and if I lose, we will surrender to you." Day after day, morning after morning, this big, bad, ugly giant would taunt the armies of Israel, and each day the army of Israel cowered back and shrank and didn't know what to do. Now, he was a small kid, David was. He was not in the army, though his older brothers were. He was the youngest of the family of 8 sons, and he was a shepherd with his father's sheep outside of the little town of Bethlehem. He was at home with his mom and his dad, and Jesse asked young David to bring a couple of sandwiches and a bunch of cheese to his brothers out on the front line. So David goes with his little North Face backpack filled with bread and 10 loaves of bread and cheese. He runs off to his brothers just as the company of Israel was drawing up their battle lines against the evil Philistine. Just as David gets to the front line, big, ugly Goliath again shouts out his bully taunt against the army of Israel. And again, the whole army of Israel ran back and cowered in fear. As they were running away, David asked a couple of the soldiers, "What would be done for the man who kills this big, ugly Philistine and removes his disgrace from Israel? Who is this Philistine that he can defy the armies of the living God?" Now, those are the first words spoken from David, this young punk kid. But there are words that would catapult him from being a small young boy to a mighty warrior, a leader, a king, and a follower of God's dream for his life. When his oldest brothers heard that he was asking this question, they said to David, "What in the heck are you doing here? Why don't you go home and be a little shepherd, you little punk?" And David said, "Now what have I done? Can't I even speak?" The young boy, David said, "Give me a chance to go up against this big, ugly giant. God has been with me before, and God will be with me now." Somehow, this young, small David eventually ended up before King Saul, who took David up on his offer. And King Saul dresses David in King Saul's own battle garments. He put a coat of armor on him and a bronze helmet on his head and a sword in his hand. David is 12 years old. David said, this isn't me. This armor might work for you, but it doesn't work for me. So David took King Saul's armor off, went down to the stream, chose 5 smooth stones from the bubbling brook and put them in his shepherd's pouch, and then went off to face Goliath. Now you know the story. Goliath ridiculed young David. Goliath came to David with Goliath's shield bearer in front of him and said, "Am I a dog that you come to me with stones?" And David faced the giant and said, "I come to you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God whom you have defiled. This day God will hand you over to me, so that the entire world might know that it's not me who slays you, but God himself." So David takes one small, smooth stone, puts it in his sling, swung it faster and faster with a prayer to God on his lips and in his heart. Let that one small, smooth stone go, and it struck Goliath smack dab in the middle of the forehead. Goliath's eyes cross, his legs buckle. He crumples to the ground face first and dies. David, young David, with one small, smooth stone and God's power in his life and in his heart, took down the big, bad, ugly giant Goliath. Now, you know, it's not just a nice little Sunday school story, this story of David and Goliath. It's a story about God's power and presence and God's ability to slay Goliath the giant. It's a story of a young boy with 5 smooth stones who went up against a giant with what was most natural to him, 5 smooth stones and a sling that he kept in his shepherd's pouch to protect his flock. And with 5 smooth stones, he fortified God's power and slayed the giant. It's not a nice little Sunday school story about David and Goliath. It's a story about us, a story about the giants that we face. I mean, think about that. What giants do you face in your life? We all have them. You know, if you think about it, we all have giants in our lives. What are the giants you face in your life? Maybe when you were young, it was a bully on a playground. As you get older, the giant may be financial issues or job security or parenting teenagers. It might be loneliness. It might be heartache. It might be moral failure. It might be an addiction. It might be depression, insecurity, not measuring up. What are the giants that you face in life? Think of that person, that place, or that thing that stands in your way to fulfilling what you really know that God wants for you in your life. Think of that person, place, or thing that's too big, too gargantuan. You've tried before and you've failed again and again. The giant is still there. It's too much. You can't overcome it. You've given your best shot at it and you realize there's no use, and so you might as well just give up. That's what David's brothers did in the army of Israel. The giant Goliath was too much for them. So they just picked up and retreated because there's nothing you can do. And when there's nothing you can do, you might as well do nothing. But young David, with a small, smooth stone in his hand, went up against Goliath, the giant. Prayer in his heart and a dream from God about what he was to do, David overcame that giant. And here's an important insight. Giants do not make us or break us. The problems we face do not make us or break us. Giants simply reveal who we really are. Okay? Giants don't make us or break us. They reveal who we really are. David did not become a hero the day he killed Goliath the giant. Instead, who David was really exposed. Goliath the giant allowed David to show the world who he really was, a faithful follower of God who lived his life in confidence, knowing that with God all things are possible. Goliath, the giant in David's life, did not make him or break him. He allowed David to show the world who he really was. With 5 smooth stones. Think about 5 smooth stones and the word faith. F, think of that, what David had. David had F, fortitude. It took guts to do what he did, but David was able to take on a bigger foe because David's fortitude kept him going. When we face giants in our lives, we have to have fortitude. There's no doubt that giants will come into our lives, but with fortitude, we can be strengthened to face them. A, F-A. David had an attitude, a perspective in life that made all the difference in the world. David embraced a can-do attitude. David knew that every moment of every day can be filled with God's leading and guiding us. Faith means F, fortitude, A, attitude, T, or I, F-A-I-T-H. I is initiative. When the army of Israel was facing the Philistines, them on one side of the mountain, the army of Israel on the other, it was a standoff and they were stuck. And being stuck, when you're stuck, you are defeated because it makes you not being able to move. David stepped out. He took initiative with those 5 small, smooth stones. He stepped out even though the odds were against him. Moses stepped out into the Red Sea. Joshua put his foot in that raging river. Peter stepped out of the boat. Without initiative and attitude and fortitude, not much happens, and you remain stuck where you are. But David also, T, F-A-I-T, had a testimony. When wicked King Saul said to David, "You're not able to go up against this giant because you're just a kid," David gave his testimony. He said, when I was a shepherd, when a lion or bear came and took a lamb out of the flock, he'd catch it and kill it and strike it and rescue the sheep. David testified and gave glory to God. He said, "The Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and from the paw of the bear will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine." Testimony comes when we live a life walking with God. Finally, David had H, F-A-I-T-H, help. Help from God. David recognized that he couldn't do it alone, but he needed help from God facing that giant in his life. Essentially, he said, "I can do all things through Christ, through God, who strengthens me." So David had fortitude. He had attitude, F-A-I. He had initiative. T, he had a testimony. H, he had help from God. When you face giants in your life, which you will, you can remember to use those 5 small, smooth stones of faith, attitude, initiative, testimony, and help from God. I will look forward to being with you at the next episode, and until then, you just make it a great day. See you then. Bye-bye.